Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the California Consultation Series hosted by Circular Action Alliance, or CAA. My name is Frances Oni, and I will be moderating today's webinar. First, let's review today's agenda. Isabel, if you can move to the agenda. Thank you. There we go. All right, so first we're going to review today's agenda. So if we could go back. First, we're going to introduce our panelists, then we'll give an overview of CAA and SB 54. Next, we'll have a presentation on compostable packaging and single-use serviceware, followed by a Q&A period. We'll finish off today's webinar by reviewing important next steps. With that, let's meet today's panelists. Emily Coven is CAA's California Executive Director. Isabel Fauché is a policy advisor. Francis Veilleux is Recycling Operations Manager, and Pierre Benavides is a technical advisor. I want to highlight a few important reminders. We can go to the next slide. Today's presentation is intended for informational purposes only. CAA is not a law firm and does not provide legal advice. If you need legal guidance, please consult with your own counsel. And the next slide, please. We want to underscore our commitment to compliance with federal and state antitrust laws. As participants, we need to avoid discussions around pricing, market allocation, or other topics that could create even the appearance of anti-competitive behavior. And then next slide, please. A few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and the slide deck will be available on CAA's California Consultation webpage. After today's webinar, you'll also receive a link to a questionnaire. We encourage you to complete it within 30 days, as your input is essential to shaping a practical and effective program plan. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A portion of the webinar. All participants will remain muted throughout this session. CAA provides updates on the program plan development at the Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meetings, which anyone can attend by registering on CalRecycle's website. We encourage you to register and attend the remainder of CAA's California Consultation Series webinars. If we can go to the next slide, you see a calendar of those webinars. So please join those, and we will put a link in the chat after this. And now I would like to hand it over to Emily Coven, California Executive Director of CAA.
Thank you, Frances, and welcome everybody. So glad to see so many people here. So some of you may be super familiar with CAA, but for those of you for whom this is your first time seeing any of us, I thought I'd just give a quick introduction to the organization. Next slide, please. So CAA is a producer-led organization. So it was originally founded by a lot of the logos, the companies associated with a lot of the logos you see on the screen here, coming together to figure out producer responsibility in the United States, specifically around paper and packaging. We work so far in every state where they have actually selected a producer responsibility organization, and hope to continue to do so. Next slide. So in terms of who we are and where we are, CAA is about 100 people right now, but growing pretty quickly as we stand up programs in different states. So we've already been selected as the pro in the dark blue states that you see here on the screen. And the other ones that you see are kind of in the works, forthcoming. We also have staff across the entire United States as well as in Canada. And I wanted to mention that because one of the things that's really great about CAA, we have a ton of in-house expertise about extended producer responsibility, how to implement it and do it well. So you'll see some of our panelists today, I think actually all of them except for me are from Canada, and that's because Canada has been doing this longer than we have. So we get to enjoy their expertise. And similarly for us here in California, we are the third state, so we can learn a lot from our counterparts in Oregon and Colorado, all of whom are also part of CAA. So the good news is we're not reinventing the wheel. Next slide. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of the producer responsibility organization, this kind of lays it out. I will go through this pretty quickly. You can look at it more in your own time. If you stop at sort of the top of the clock here, we're doing the first step now, which is the consultation process. That's what you all are participating in today. Thank you very much. Where we really want to hear from communities, from interest holders, your input into our plan. Our plan is our next step. That's what we're working on now as well. We will submit that to the state on June 15th. When we work a lot with producers, so we collect fees from them, they report to us, we incentivize them to make packaging design changes to conform with the laws, and then we invest and educate in communities. So we have very lofty goals in California, and we need to make a lot of investments in order to make those happen, and also do a ton of education. Next slide. Super quickly, I'm not going to read this whole slide, but I just wanted to, this is not the last time you'll hear this from CAA, start to disambiguate between CAA and CalRecycle. There's a lot of confusion out there as to who does what. CAA, we are the planners and the implementers. CalRecycle, they're the regulators, and they have oversight over us. And so as you come to us with questions, you may find that we're like, go ask CalRecycle. And if you go to CalRecycle with questions, you may find that they're like, go talk to CAA. And this may get frustrating at times, but we're trying to all stay in our lanes, and hopefully eventually everybody will come to have a better understanding of where we all fit into the puzzle. Next slide. SB 54, I imagine you've heard of it because you're here on this webinar. Very, very broad strokes. What SB 54 is setting out in terms for goals is reducing our plastic waste by 25%, with 10% of that coming from reuse and refill, and recycling 65% of that remaining plastic waste. This is a really, really tall order. This is our job as the pro to work with producers, communities to make sure this happens. Obviously, the recycling system and all our infrastructure is a big part of that. And then individual producers are all individually responsible for ensuring all this is by 2032, that 100% of their packaging is recyclable or compostable. Next slide. And so why you all are here today and why this super matters that you're here, and thank you for being here, is that we're building this program plan, and we have a bunch of amazing experts, but we do not have all the ideas. We need your ideas. I put some constraints around this box, so I just wanted you all to be aware that while we need all the ideas, we need the big ideas, the crazy ideas, the small ideas, there's no bad ideas, we do have constraints as well. We have the laws, the regulations, we have time. We are at a ticking time right now to get to compliance with all these laws, not to mention change takes a long time. If we want to, change how facilities work, that takes a while. If we want to deploy a reuse refill, that takes a while. We have financial constraints. We are going to be collecting fees from producers, but not infinitely. And then there's always uncertainty is a big constraint as well. We don't have final regulations, so there's a lot of things we don't know yet, but we'll build the plan to the best of our ability with your input to deal with all that uncertainty. So please participate and send us your ideas. And finally, next slide, I just wanted to say a quick thing about California. We are super fortunate to be in California. It's a huge state. We got 40 million people. And, not only will this be the biggest and most impactful packaging EPR program in the world when we're done, but the whole world is watching California. All eyes are on California. We have an amazing opportunity here to not only have this big impact on our state, but well beyond the state, because we're really sort of setting a new standard here in California. So it's huge, it's ambitious, it's hard. Please participate. And with that, I will hand it over to Isabel to tell you about the nuts and bolts of compostables.
Thank you, Emily. Next slide, please. Thanks. So good morning, everyone. My name is Isabel Fauché, and I will be taking you through the main section of this webinar presentation. One of the key objectives, as was stated previously, of SB 54 is to ensure that 100% of single-use packaging and food service ware sold in the state is recyclable or compostable by 2032. In today's webinar, we will unpack what being compostable means in California. I'll provide an overview of the current landscape and barriers that exist today with regards to compostables. I'll share CA's proposed approach to compostables in terms of levers and what we're proposing in terms of funding eligibility requirements. And finally, we'll take questions and receive feedback from you. I would like to note here in passing that throughout the presentation, I will use the term compostables in the short form to refer to compostables packaging and single-use serviceware. Next slide, please. Before proceeding, it's useful to highlight the statutory requirements for the program plan as they pertain to compostables. The program plan must share how CAA will support the collection, processing, and development of responsible end markets, or REMs, for compostable packaging. It must discuss how CAA will build on existing collection and composting infrastructure. So in other words, how it will be supplemental to this existing infrastructure and not in conflict with it. And lastly, it must provide an overview of CAA's education efforts to promote collection and reduce contamination. Next slide, please. There are 5 requirements that compostables must meet in order to be eligible for being labeled compostable as per AB 1201, which is referenced in SB 54. They must qualify as an allowable input under the USDA NOP starting June 30th, 2027. As many of you know, CalRecycle granted an 18-month extension in June 2025 to the initial date that had been set for January 1st, 2026. The extension allows certified compostable plastics items to continue making a compostability claim even though they are not allowable organic inputs. I will speak to this point in greater detail on the next slide. In terms of the other requirements, they must be designed for compostability, which means they must be intended to be recovered with food scraps, yard waste, etc. There is a PFAS restriction in terms of an upper limit on the total organic fluorine concentration must not be greater than 100 parts per million. They must be clearly labeled, so they must be visibly distinguishable from non-compostable products to support consumer understanding and efficient processing at facilities. And lastly, they must be third-party certified. So there is an exemption on this requirement for fiber-only products without plastics. Next slide, please. I mentioned a few moments ago the NOP, or National Organic Program. This is a program of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and this is the entity who sets organic national standards. The National Organic Standard Board, for its part, is the federal advisory board that recommends changes to the national list. This is the list of substances that are allowed and prohibited in organic agriculture. Under current rules, the national list bans synthetic feedstocks in compost used in organic farming. Synthetic substances are formulated or manufactured by a chemical process or by a process that chemically changes a substance extracted from naturally occurring plant, animal, or mineral sources. The exception to this are newspapers and recycled paper that contain no glossy or colored inks. Certified compostable plastics are considered synthetic and are therefore not considered allowed as an input into organic agriculture at the moment. In 2023, the Biodegradable Products Institute, or BPI, petitioned the USDA for rulemaking, specifically to update the compost definition and recognize ASTM compostability standards. The USDA asked the NOSB to submit feedback and recommendation on the petition. As per this request, the NOSB commissioned a technical report, which was released in April of this year. As a next step, on November 5th so next month, the issue will be addressed at the NOSB fall meeting as per the agenda items that have been posted to its website. I should note, however, that the USDA Lapse in Appropriation Plan lists the National Organic Program as an activity that does not operate during a shutdown. So therefore, if NOP staff do not return by October 22nd, the NOSB fall meeting will be canceled. Next slide, please. Given all this, CAA must contend with some unknowns regarding whether what is currently considered compostable by CalRecycle will change. Next slide, please. What we do know at the moment are those covered material categories that received a positive compostability determination when the CMC list was released on January 1st of this year. The table that you see on the slide summarizes those categories and provides a representative example of an item for each category. So I'd like to point out three things regarding this table. Firstly, there are other CMCs that have received both a compostability and a recyclability determination. For example, craft paper, molded fiber, and corrugated cardboard. But we show here only the ones that are only compostable. Secondly, as indicated by CalRecycle, the compostability determination is based on a category by category basis, not on an item by item basis. So in other words, an individual item is not necessarily eligible to be labeled compostable if it falls in a category that has a positive compostability determination. It must meet all 5 requirements, as I spoke to previously. And lastly, you see 2 asterisk little stars beside the uncoated paper/fiber packaging. This is because we want to draw your attention to the fact that fiber-only single-use serviceware is not covered material under SB 54, but documentation proving that the item does not incorporate plastics must be provided by producers to CalRecycle to this effect upon request. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to move on to the current landscape for compostable acceptance. From the project that we've recently concluded, and which I will speak to in more detail shortly, we know that current organics collection guidelines in many California communities excludes compostable plastic and food serviceware, and that wax-coated cardboard and untreated wood are not commonly accepted, while paper and fiber packaging that is food soiled is typically accepted. Therefore, most communities would need to update their programs and guidelines in a minor way to accept currently eligible compostables, while major changes would be required to accept the full scope of compostables. Next slide, please. In terms of the current processing landscape, according to the SWIS, or Solid Waste Information System database, there are 41 active mixed composting facilities, so those that take both food waste and green waste, in the state. According to the RDRS, or the Recycling and Disposable Reporting System, there's about 3.3 million tons of organics that were processed in 2024. So this includes the 3 categories that you see on the table at the bottom right side of your screen. And it's safe to say there's at least 10 times more green waste that was processed than food waste. We expect the needs assessments that will be finalized in early 2026 to provide more recent and granular information on capacities, throughputs, etc. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, CAA engaged an external consultant to gather perspectives on barriers and solutions to compostables as a viable compliance pathway under SB 54 from different interest holders. We held over 40 interviews as part of this project. On the next two slides, I will summarize the barriers that interview participants identified. Next slide, please. Starting with the 5 barriers that achieved a high level of consensus from interview participants, which are listed here. As issue 1, we have limited acceptance. So I referred to this earlier. Many facilities do not accept the broad scope of compostable packaging and serviceware and view them as undesirable. There's the inability of operators to distinguish between certified compostable plastics from lookalikes. Followed by, at issue 3, a high level of plastic contamination at the facilities, regardless of whether this facility accepts or doesn't accept compostable plastics. This creates high costs for removal of the contamination it creates. There is consumer confusion about compostables. They are unsure what belongs and does not belong in the green bin, which in turn leads to improper disposal practices. And finally, there's insufficient composting capacity, which constrains acceptance of new materials. Next slide, please. Here we present those barriers that achieved medium to low consensus amongst interview participants. Issue 6, prevalence of depackaging equipment, refers to systems designed to remove all packaging, regardless of whether they are compostable or not, before the item can make its way to the compost pile. Issue 7 refers to the fact that organic certification is used as a quality benchmark by processors for their end product, even though the compost is often sold to conventional, not organic agricultural market. Issue 8, as we've discussed, product labeling requirements in California are tied to NOP standards. These rules are over 25 years old and tend to favor fiber products while disadvantaging newer and emerging materials. We've also heard that the NOSB process to update the national list is lengthy and complex. And lastly, as issue 9, some facilities report poor disintegration of compostables in the field, especially where short processing times limit material breakdown. Next slide, please. I'd now like to move on to discussing CAA's proposed approach to the management of compostables. CAA is proposing a two-pronged approach. Option A consists of a narrow scope of CMCs, which are those that are eligible to be labeled compostable as per the January 1st CMC list. Option B is the full scope of compostables and consists of all CMCs in option A, plus those listed on the right side of your screen. Next slide, please. This two-pronged approach allows CAA to contend with the uncertainty pertaining to CalRecycle's compostability determinations, while considering the realities of the current composting collection and processing landscape. If plastics designed to be composted are considered compostable by CalRecycle at the time of CAA's program launch, service providers would either accept a narrow or an expanded scope of materials, option A or option B. Conversely, if those materials are not considered compostable by CalRecycle at the time of or during implementation, only option A would be available. Next slide, please. In order to support this approach, we are proposing 4 levers. They are labeling guidance, acceptable material incentive, processing incentive, and market development initiative. For both types of incentives, the acceptable material one and the processing, the amount of the incentive would be tiered. So it would be a lower amount would be offered for option a lower amount would be offered for option A and a higher amount for option B. So I will explain each of these in more detail in the following slides. Next slide, please. Starting with labeling guidance, in the absence of state mandated labeling practices, CAA could provide guidance to its producers to help with as a first area of support, ensuring materials are compliant with AB 1201's third-party certification requirements. And on a second level, helping producers avoid lookalikes and deceptive marketing by encouraging producers to adopt the requirements that are in place in states that have passed marketing claims standards, such as Washington and Colorado. Next slide, please. We are proposing to offer a per-stop incentive to programs that accept target materials. The incentive amount would be lower for option A, as similar to the collection incentive, and higher for option B. Examples of what the incentive could fund include education and outreach to encourage proper participation in composting collection and enforcement at the curb, things like lid flips, cart tags, etc., to reduce contamination. Next slide, please. Similarly, we are proposing to offer a financial incentive, again on a tiered level, option A versus option B, to operators that process targeted covered materials. The incentive would be based on total throughput, capped to a maximum amount per facility. It would be non-prescriptive, meaning that it could be used for contamination removal, process bifurcation, equipment purchase, etc. Organics processing facility who use depackagers would only be eligible if one of the following two situations were true. So either the equipment allows the target material into the compost pile. For example, we've heard that some depackagers do allow fiber packaging to move through the process, or if the target material is bifurcated directly to the compost pile. And there would be periodic third-party audits conducted to measure the amount of target material, so the compostable packaging, that's entering the facility and enabling CAA reporting and tracking, and to measure the impact of education and outreach on contamination levels. Next slide, please. Lastly, in order to support the development of non-organic compost end markets, we are proposing to make funds available for pilots and tests. Examples include uses in transportation, construction and development, soil application, rangeland remediation, and carbon sequestration. Next slide, please. In addition to informing the proposed levers that I just presented, the project that we concluded recently revealed a strong consensus on the topic of closed venues. Several interview participants felt that closed venues such as schools, sports stadiums, attractions, etc., represent the most viable pathway to successful compostable packaging collection and processing, because these venues control the inputs, i.e. the types of compostable serviceware that is offered to consumers, and they have the power, or they are able to significantly limit contamination before the material arrives at the processing facility. A successful example of this is San Diego's Petco Park, home to the Padres baseball team. They have established a partnership for processing of compostable packaging with Republic Services at Republic's facility located at Otay Landfill. Next slide, please. The last segment of my presentation consists of sharing with you CAA's approach to funding eligibility requirements. There are 4 requirements that organics processing facilities would have to meet in order to receive funding. So the first obvious and simple one is that they would have to accept in scope covered compostable materials, so either option A or B. Secondly, they would have to meet the U.S. Compost Council seal of testing assurance requirements or an equivalent standard for compost product sampling and testing. Thirdly, they would have to confirm that they are responsibly processing in-scope covered compostable materials. And for this, we are proposing to leverage the recently published ASTM standards, which establish defined operating conditions adapted from the composting handbook. So for example, temperature, moisture, carbon to nitrogen ratio, pH, minimum active phase, number of days, etc. And lastly, they would have to meet the forthcoming CAA responsible end market standard. So I invite you to tune in to the webinar that will be delivered by my colleague, Pierre Benavidez, who is with us today on October 22nd to learn more about this standard. Next slide, please. This concludes the presentation segment of the webinar, so I will hand it over to my colleagues now to kick off the question and answer.